Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. And you know what? They're about to be the makers of the best bags in a variety of other categories. Available now. Rapscallion Bags, a spin-off of Pound. They make beverage carrier containers. I have one here at the house. It's awesome. It holds 6 bottles of wine, 2 big growlers, whatever you want to put in it. It's in a really nice looking case. You can take it to a dinner party. You can take it with you out to the park, wherever you're headed. Check it out, rapscallionbags.com, and keep an eye out for the Fly Pack coming to Pound very soon. A really beautifully put together travel bag. It's in the final stages of development right now. Check everything out at pounddiscgolf.com. Welcome to a special holiday roundtable edition of the Upshot. Of course, I'm joined by Josh Mansfield. I'm Charlie Eisenhood, and we have another fantastic panel for discussion this week as we discuss player sponsorships in disc golf and how that has evolved over time, where things stand today, and where we could be heading in the future as player compensation has ramped up considerably in the last few years. And so first, let me please introduce our panelists. Very excited to have from Innova Disc Golf and US Disc Golf, Jonathan Poole. He's also the event director of the USDGC, longtime team manager at Innova. Jonathan, how are you?
I am great and in much better voice. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Sarah Hokum is a current player for Team MVP. She's also the 2012 World Champion. She joins us. Sarah, hello.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to talk about this. Thanks for having me.
And last but not least, Paul Ulibarri from Discraft. He's the team captain over there and has been a longtime fixture in the sport. Paul, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I look forward to this conversation for sure.
All right, so I'll throw it right back to Paul with the first question here, which Paul and I actually had a conversation about this topic a little bit about a week ago, and I found it incredibly enlightening. We'll see how much he's willing to share today, but you've been around the sport a long time, and you've kind of seen the progression from how things were 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago to where they are today. What would you say has been sort of the most notable change when it comes to the sponsorship side of the game? So when you're, getting an agreement, whether that be with a manufacturer, sort of the typical big sponsorship, or with, a bag company or anything like that, what has been the biggest change over the last, let's say, decade?
That's a great question. I think it has to do with a few things, honestly. I think with the progression of the sport, it takes good people in place, especially on the management level, to be able to give the players opportunities, first of all. And then it has to do with a lot of social media. The social media presence is just, skyrocketed in the last few years compared to, the days when I first started. I also think, with YouTube and disc golf going live, the pro tour tournaments, getting more money, I think that all of that's kind of wrapped into a nice package really gives us a kind of a more clear direction to go, because all of that stuff brings value. And when you bring value to the consumer, which is whoever's, following these people on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or watching the Disc Golf Network, watching the players play, now you have more eyes on the sport, which there's value there from the player's perspective and the manufacturer's perspective.
So, I think I kind of want to ask this question to each person, because I think it's sort of interesting to get the different perspectives on it. Sarah, how have you seen things change over your tenure?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with everything that Yuli's saying, but I think almost on like a bigger perspective, it's really changed in the way that a player is valued, whether that, I think that the perception of player value has really changed over time. I know in the beginning years, we were kind of scraping by and just like, hey, I swear that this matters, that you help me, and that I swear that weren't very many metrics to measure a player value. So you're just like, I'm going to sell this, and I'm going to be out there working it, and there's no way to really measure that. And I think that over time we've really seen, through social media, and then also just through the massive amount of video coverage out there, that we're really seeing the fruits of that labor that may have been a fruit prior, but it's harder to measure at that point. And then I think also with the advent after Prodigy came out and kind of had that super team, I think the expectation that a tour series disc be created for people that weren't a world champion to help them on the road, I think that culture really changed and started to really help the players down the road. And, over the last like 5 or 6 years, and now especially in the most recent years.
How about you, Jonathan?
Well, I agree with all that. I mean, I think they both hit on some very good points. I mean, it's been exciting for me, over the years, just on a personal level, to see these kinds of opportunities open up. They were pretty few and far between once upon a time. So to see really, people not just be able to scrape and survive. I mean, to see now more people, more than just one or two, to actually be able to be comfortable and, be comfortable on the road. It's such a huge sacrifice. I mean, I traveled and played. I never toured like these guys have, but it's quite a sacrifice to commit to living your life on the road, and you're setting everything else on hold. And you should be compensated fairly for that. So to see a time come when you actually can legitimately make a living, that wasn't the case for a really long time. And, it was always a goal for me. It was a goal for our team. One reason we had such a big team historically is because we wanted to help. We wanted to help as many people as we could, and we did along the way. I think that's one of the things that's changing. It's really difficult with now what it takes to take good care of the people at the top. It's difficult to have a team of 100 people, 150 people. I mean, that's a lot of work. So I'd imagine all the manufacturers are sort of revisiting the process that it takes to do that job well, and take good care of them and get good value back from the endeavor to begin with.
Yeah, I kind of want to go back to when I said it also has to do with a lot of the management. I can go back to the days when I was sponsored by Innova, and I went through Jonathan for a lot of my stuff. And at the time, the Star team, there were stipulations to where you weren't allowed to be on Team Star or anything unless you had won a major championship. And when I say management is important, is because it takes somebody who can kind of see the future and make some tough decisions or go out on a limb for a player. And I remember specifically you, Jonathan, giving me a shot, and I had never won anything like that. I think I'd won a national tour at the time. And you went to the uppers and you got me on that Star team. And that's something we can't overlook, because it does take a good manager to be able to make those decisions. And now, little steps like that got us to where we are now. And so when I mentioned management, it takes that type of person. I think that one of the things that didn't necessarily hold us back, but the vision wasn't clear. And at the top, that's a risk. And risks are tough to make in business. And now we see more and more companies taking that risk, but I feel like it took baby steps to get here. And so I just want to commend you for being a good manager and helping us get to that point.
Well, it's really, yeah. I mean, if you have something to add there, go ahead. I just think it's very interesting to see how there have been what feels like sort of watershed moments. It feels to me like Innova really set the bar for what player sponsorship, could be, and maintains a large team to this day. But you have these moments like when Prodigy, brought everybody in. I mean, Paul, Sarah, you were both sponsored by Prodigy for a time. And then, we had Paul Macbeth going to Discraft, the $1 million deal, the $10 million deal. These feel like these sort of watershed moments where it raises the level, it raises the bar, in your minds, and I'll just open this up to whoever wants to answer first, what has been like the biggest catalyst for getting to the point where now it feels like players who are at least of a certain level of ability and, ability to market their manufacturing, sponsor, to be able to have what's essentially like an actual job playing disc golf, where they can afford to live on the road and not just have to try to, scrape things together. And I know that there's still a lot of players out there for whom that's the case, that it's kind of like van life 100% and it's low expenses. But there are players now who legitimately, and not just the top, 5 highest compensated players, who legitimately make a reasonable annual salary at this point from manufacturing. So is there a particular catalyst that you would point to that says this was the thing that pushed us into this new era?
I mean, I would definitely jump in here real quick, and just obviously to me, Prodigy made a big difference from a player perspective. I mean, obviously historically, you have Innova setting this bar, but when Prodigy came out and took all those players and paid them a salary for the first time, then when that mass there was also this watershed moment when players started leaving. Once that 2-year agreement was up with Prodigy, we saw a lot of players leaving, but they weren't leaving for lesser contracts. It actually pushed all these other companies to start matching and beating what Prodigy could offer. And I think that was this real start of salaries for more than just a few people.
No, I totally agree, Sarah. I think that was a big moving point in the sport. And yeah, because of that, it, made the other manufacturers say, okay, if we want to keep these players, we got to give them more, because that's what they need. Not only that's what they need, but that's what they're getting. And so if they want those players, not necessarily back, but to even keep players, they were going to have to do that.
Jonathan, when you lost players to Prodigy, how did you feel about that? What was Innova's reaction?
I don't know. I mean, that one was pretty mixed, because everybody knew everybody. From what I remember of that time, the thing that struck me as peculiar was, this is that time of season where, you're talking to your players and that other companies are talking to them, and it feels like somebody's dating your girlfriend. And you're just having these conversations that are just weird. And the one thing that I remember pretty clearly from that particular time frame was everybody's response was almost identical. Like they'd been, coached up, and it's hard to keep secrets in disc golf, so some of what happened we saw coming. We didn't know who all was going to be involved. So, I mean, it was something that would have been strange enough as it was. It made it even stranger because, super close to a lot of the people involved for me. But back to something I said earlier, you're happy for those kinds of opportunities. I mean, that was a game changer, like something like that. Sarah's absolutely right. Like that had never been done before. And I think that got a lot of people's attention. And I think that the players were super stoked to have more formal and what wound up being more rigid contracts. I think we learned a lot in that, because for some that worked out great, and maybe for some others who wanted to move on, it wasn't easy to do. And so, but that forced us to take a step more in a more professional direction. So that was definitely huge. And then back on the media, certainly more in recent years. I mean, you just can't underestimate the visibility of all players and what that really means. And you combine that with more manufacturers, more competition year round in every aspect of what we do. And so, athletes matter, this matters, that visibility out there on tour, especially with fan bases surging the way that they are. I mean, if it's not the athletes, then what are you going to look to as a manufacturer of whatever it is in disc golf, not just disc, but what's going to set you apart in what is becoming a very competitive landscape?
So talking a little bit about that kind of setting apart, I think that also applies in terms of the kind of compensation that players get. So I have a 2-part question. The first question I want to ask each of you, and then we'll move on to the second one. what were your initial contracts like? So Jonathan, for Team Innova, what were those initial contracts? What did they include? Were they royalties? Were they entry fees? And then Paul and Sarah, as you're willing to share, what did your guys' initial contracts have in them as sponsored players? Just very, very beginning of your sponsored career.
I mean, royalties is something that came later. Obviously I kind of predate Tour Series and all that. So, I mean, it's very heavy on performance bonuses. I mean, I don't know how that all shakes out now, but we were always at the top or near the top in terms of, how much you could earn. And then it was entry fees and just stuff, whatever you needed to do the job. And then, Tour Series came along, and that was a huge game changer. And we've just seen the commas and the zeros kind of add up. And you've seen the difference, the influence that athletes can make. The numbers don't lie. And the thing that I think is that we're still as an industry trying to figure out is how to better value an athlete's just the value to the brand overall. I mean, it's one thing to get a royalty on something specific with your name on it, but there's something to be said for what you do to move the needle across the board in the sales of all other products. And that's something where I feel like just disc golf sort of in this phase of evolving into, we're all sort of figuring that out as we go along.
So my first contract ever, I think I got 25 discs, which back when we first started, like just the fact that you were sponsored, if you were sponsored by Innova, that was the biggest company, period. And there was respect that came with that. And I think that's more of what we were looking for is like, if you were sponsored by Innova or Discraft, those two, you were a good player, period. Like they didn't just sponsor anybody with a bag full of discs, which I feel like nowadays, you see all these other teams or all kinds of different teams to where if you have a good influence, like you have a good friend group and you're kind of the leader of that friend group, like you could be sponsored by a company. Skills don't matter. Back then, like it legitimately mattered. And 25 discs was a lot of discs. Moving forward in my career, when I was with Innova, the performance bonuses is what it really came down to. So it forced me to play a lot of tournaments. I remember chasing the point series every year. So I'd play as many tournaments as I possibly could, because the point series bonus, if you won that, was with a PDGA point series, was $1,000 bonus. And then if I reached a certain amount of tournaments, that was a $500 bonus. And if my rating was a certain way, that was another $500 bonus. So it really pushed the player to like play a lot, play well, and then that's really where you got compensated. So, I mean, obviously that's changed, but that's what I remember my contracts being.
Yeah, and my first contract, I think I got 50 discs, honestly. I don't know. But it was a certain number. It's pretty small in comparison now, number of discs. But I was stoked, right? And I used all of them up. I'm just trying to figure out what I wanted to throw. And then I got performance bonuses. They gave me like 2 polos and a hat and a towel. Took some headshots. But performance bonuses, and even then, as an FPO, it was like 2007, 2008, 2009. And then really, you had to have 8 people in our division in order to qualify for a bonus. So it really made a difference on what tournaments I would play. Because I wouldn't want to play, an A tier with only 6 people. So that now is not as much of a problem, thankfully.
So taking those old sponsorships and, what they kind of look like originally, what is in a typical, perhaps not like the top tier, Paul McBeth's contract, or even one of your guys' contracts, but for your average elite team, whether that be, the star team for Innova or the touring team for Discraft or MVP, from your knowledge, what is typically included in a sponsorship? Is it living stipend, entry fees? How do the performance bonuses today look relative to what they used to look like in terms of, is it multi-win? Is it pro tour? Describe kind of some of those structures just on a general level then of how contracts are built and presented to players and offer packages today.
So with Discraft, I work really close with Bob Julio, who is the manager of Discraft, and I see a lot of the contracts, and we kind of work together to write those contracts for the player. And one of the things that when I came over to the team, they were real receptive of the information that I would give about the tour players. And since then, we've really tried to make it individual for the elite team, individualize the contract. So it's not just one person gets the same as the next person on that level of team. I really try to look at what those players do throughout the season, look at their habits, look what they're good at, and then form a contract around that, form a contract around their strengths. That way we can get the best out of them. Instead of just being like, okay, it's performance bonus. If you do a little social media, that's great. Because there are players out there who aren't the best in the world. They're probably not going to win big tournaments. Obviously, they have the skills to, but that's something that I really tried to get to the manufacturer is not everybody can be a GOAT, but there's a lot of value in these players. And if we can form their contracts around what's best for them individually, now we're getting the best of both worlds because we're lifting that player up. We're giving them bonuses for what they do best, whether that's social media, whether it's coaching, whether it's the impact they have in the community around where they are. There's certain players that might dominate their region, but then when they go out on tour, they don't perform as well. Why would we force them to go on tour type thing? Obviously, we want them out there because they're going to get better. But if there's somebody who's like, listen, I just don't perform at those big tournaments, I feel more comfortable playing at all these tournaments at home, and they win 20 tournaments a year, why wouldn't we form a contract to best suit that player? And I think that's something that hasn't been done in years past. And I think from that, we're able to keep more players happy on the team because they're not forced to do something they're not good at.
Yeah. And you're no longer just a number of a person, that, and like you said, the ability to actually have the, for companies to hire a manager like yourself to actually take the time to know those players and incentivize the contracts properly. That's been such a big difference in my experience as well, is just being able to formulate a contract that works that incentivizes my own personal goals and is not necessarily a cookie cutter version of another similar player.
It seems to me, just anecdotally, and like even your answers right now, it's still people don't totally want to talk about exactly like what's in their contract. It seems to me that the trend has been towards more just cash payment on a monthly basis. You can carve up the money however you want to call it, right? Entry fees, gas, just straight up salary or stipend. And then, so then you also have the royalties side, which is obviously where the most successful players seem to make a lot of their money. I mean, Nate Sexton, I say it on the show a lot, like he has a Firebird money printing machine. And to have a disc like that sells as much as it does, and you're getting $4 or $5 a disc, like that makes a huge difference. But it seems that what I've heard from players is that we're starting to see more trend towards, rather than just straight up bonuses, companies are now paying players directly every month. That's part of the contract. Like you get a cash payment. How has that evolved, and like where are we now compared to where we were even like 2 or 3 years ago? Because Paul, you and I talked about this last week. It seems that your personal experience has been absolutely night and day compared to just a couple of years ago. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So one of the things I want to get clear is the player on Discraft, especially, they get paid off of what they sell. So when you're talking about a monthly check, Discraft then has to sell product with that individual's name on it to compensate for whatever monthly check they're getting. So it's not like the company's just like, okay, we're giving you this no matter what, and then they don't have to do anything. We're not just making up an invisible number and being like, okay, this is what you're worth, go out and do it. the one thing that has changed is putting a name on a disc. Does that sell discs? And that's been confusing, especially over the pandemic, because everybody's buying everything. So now the company says, okay, I can sell that disc without your name on it. Why would I make you more discs? Okay. For me personally, I've proven that my brand, I can sell a lot of discs. And if they were to put the price tag higher than a stock disc and put my name on it, my disc is probably going to sell instead of the stock disc. So the value of the player is still the most important thing. We're not just paying players, okay, you're worth $2,500 a month. That's it. They get that money back by then selling that product with that person's name on it. So I hope that answers that question. As far as me personally, how it's changed from years, back, well, with the growth of disc golf, I've really tried to work on my personal brand. And this is where it gets also confusing, because you look at other sports, like let's say the LA Lakers, huge brand, number one brand in basketball, most likely, right? But if you look at their social media, I bet you LeBron James has more followers than they do on Instagram, right? So his brand's actually bigger than the LA Lakers. That's why they need him, and that's why he gets the big check. Because people can grasp that they can hook onto a player instead of the brand, and that player is now more valuable. Not maybe more valuable than the brand in general, because everybody needs disc, but that brand is valuable. For me personally, what's changed is I've never been a big winner, right? I don't win a lot of big tournaments. I haven't ever. So I had to figure out, okay, I'm never going to get paid. I tried to be the best for 10 years. I mean, I worked night and day, and Sarah's seen me in the field before everybody has. I'm a hard worker, and I worked my butt off, and I was never the best. I came close, but I never won big tournaments. And in that day and age, it was you win tournaments or you don't get paid. And that's the way that it was. I've worked really hard on proving that you don't have to win tournaments. You just have to sell product. If your brand is big and people look at you and then you're going to sell something, that's where the value is. And of course, that's helped out with social media and YouTube and everything. That's what's changed for me, is my thought process just flipped. I said, okay, if I can be one of the best in the world at disc golf, I can definitely be one of the best in the world at marketing myself. And I think that's the difference between me and a lot of players. Is it's a big secret that I keep. I haven't won a national tour or pro tour in over a decade. You know what I mean? But I bet I get paid almost as much or more than the top 10 players in the world. But that's because I've made myself valuable. With a lot of hard work in other areas. And so when I came to Discraft, I really wanted to put that for the team. Like, okay, let's focus on what these people are good at. Simon's not winning tournaments, is he? He's not. He's been injured. But he has a tremendous amount of value because he's one of the most liked people in the game. His YouTube is exploding. I mean, I watch that thing every time. He has the Vlogmas, and I'm watching every single episode he has because he's so fun to watch. There's value there, right? And so why would you take away from the player, which I really feel like disc golf was a few years ago? You win or you're nothing.
I think you're onto a lot of great points. Like there's so many ways, like just because you're not the winner, pretty good can do pretty well in this sport right now. My experience, of course, a lot of us are bound by NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. So we can't discuss specifics. So I guess it does get a little bit tricky when you're trying to understand your value, especially when you're talking with other colleagues on the road. But we can't really give specifics because we're just bound by that information, which I would like to change someday. We could probably talk about that in depth in the next topic. But in general, for a lot of contracts, there is a salary, for the upper level players that varies in amount, and then you're going to get performance bonuses. And I've started to kind of invest in myself with my salary. Like I've used what I need I need more resources, right? Like Paul is really great at building his brand that has eluded me for many, many years, kind of creating content and stuff. So, I've recently invested in tools, not only to keep my body healthy on the medical side of things, but then also to build my own brand. And I hadn't had the resources prior to these last few years to outsource some of that stuff. So I think that that's just going to snowball. And now a lot of players are having the opportunity to hire support people on the road with them that I think just exponentially expands their brand. But then outside of just, salary and bonuses, there's always disc allotment, tour series stuff. Hopefully you're getting royalties off of something that is, like Paul said, definitely the most fruitful check you're going to get. And then the incentive things such as like there's bonuses for media if you get on coverage. Some people are getting bonuses for that. And then of course there's like clothing allotments here and there. I think some of that might be going away because the dollar amounts are going up where you're like, I don't need help buying my clothes anymore. Some players get like a gas stipend or, they, so like a card, that they just, that the manufacturer writes off. Some people are getting bonuses for end of the season performance. Like they get, did you play this many tournaments? Did you get your rating to this point? Do you have this many social media followers? Some companies are, once you get to 10,000 or 15,000 or 20,000, they're giving bonuses for those types of jumps. So certainly a huge influx of social media metrics that are mattering way more than they ever have. I think that's a trend that's going to continue.
Jonathan, do you try to when you're negotiating these deals, are you trying to like build a new model at all, or does it feel like there's other things that kind of push to say, okay, now we're going to start offering this too? It's an interesting interplay there, I'm sure, especially with a team as large as Innova's, to figure out, you can't give every single person the same level of focus and obviously, money and commitment. Obviously, you have your tiered levels of teams, which has been a model that many other manufacturers have followed. So how do you go about deciding what contracts to give out and how that changes over time?
Well, I think in terms of creating something new, the way that we've done it is the way that, Paul sort of referred to it. I mean, you sort of meet each player where they are. And so you have the base agreement, and then we have addendums that are tailored to meet the needs of that player. I mean, if you've had a player that's been on the team for a while, they might not need discs, or they might not need apparel, or, the only thing that I don't remember anyone mentioning was health insurance. Not that the company provides it in the same way that they would an employee. That might be happening, but, stipends specifically for that. It's, everybody can play disc golf, but it's, when you're talking about the time that they're not just spent playing, competing, but the time that they spend practicing, the reps after rep after rep. And that's usually right on the heels of what can oftentimes be a pretty long drive. The last thing we want is for anybody to get some sort of injury and just dismiss it and not get it right. Because that can be a huge setback. So, those are the kinds of things in terms of being innovative with the agreements. It really is a lot of flexibility afforded in those addendums. Otherwise, I think they pretty much touched on everything that I can think of, and historically we had, like they mentioned, the end of the year bonuses, things like that. There were always things kind of in place that you could earn at the end of the year to sort of help you through the leaner season. You store up for the winter a little bit and help you through until the tour kicks back up in the spring. There's a little bit of that sort of built into the tour series where, essentially we look at what your numbers have been or what we think that they could be. That goes a long way to setting your, I say salary loosely. I mean, that helps set your guaranteed amount, which, really is broken then out on a monthly basis. And then usually we've been pretty conservative in the numbers with the hopes that at the end of the year, most everyone would go above whatever their guaranteed was. And they would have, one big check coming once the books were cleared for December. And again, that would sort of help you at a time when you're needing some downtime. I mean, when you're out there playing 25, 30, 35, 40 events a year, you need emotional downtime, mental downtime. Your body needs a break. You should be able to go be with family and relax and know that you're covered through those times, not just like the scenario where Paul described early on, whereas if you weren't winning late in the season, you weren't going to have anything. When you decided to take a break and go home, that was it, and the income stopped. And that's something that's very different. And I think with holiday sales and, all of the things that we kind of look at right now towards the end of the year, again, the top players are just in a lot more comfortable position. And I expect that to continue to elevate. And something we've touched on a little bit, I think Paul mentioned about how, skill was such a big part of it. I mean, he would probably remember, when I did evaluations for all of these athletes, I mean, it didn't matter what team you were on. We looked at everything. We looked at points, events played, wins by tier. I mean, everything you could look at, we looked at. And I had this big fantasy football, like mega spreadsheet with everybody on it. And you could basically sort. So I would essentially put together a proposed roster. And it was built on everything that I could get my hands on. And I would usually take that to Dave down a pace, and he would say, well, why is that person moving up? Or who is this? Or why is that person moving down? I would have data there to go and support those, to support the decisions. And the rest is just kind of your gut instinct. And then again, just the media and social media. I think about somebody like Kona, I mean, she kind of popped out of nowhere, unless you knew her from like, I think I first saw her play at the Memorial. Maybe it was the first time I actually saw her play, but like you got to be 1050 rated off the course. You got to bring it. Like you got to keep up with, that's probably the best piece of advice that I could give players who are either up and coming or kids or whoever are looking at this thinking that they might want to get involved with it. It's not just play. I mean, this is hard work. It's hard on the body. I mean, you got to do a really good job of taking care of your business. And I think Sarah touched on the fact that you're seeing more people realizing that they need help. You can't respond to every person that follows you on social media. They're not all your friends. Like you can't get to everybody. And you can't even, a lot of times you can't even go and get in a practice round. I mean, I've seen practice rounds that look like tournament rounds used to look, because they just want to show up on a Tuesday and you got a gallery and everybody's kind of mobbing you. You don't have the space. And it's just, there's a lot of work to be done to be a great disc golfer that has nothing to do with what you do on the course. It's getting you ready to that point, and working on the social media game or whatever you've got to do, your logos, your branding, whichever direction that you're going. I mean, that's something it's harder and more competitive now, but the good thing is the benefit's there. I mean, Paul just spoke to it. I mean, if you work at that and you do it right, and these are great people, you got two awesome fan worthy people here. You just go out and be you, and get whatever help that you need. And, it's harder than ever, but the upside is greater than ever. So
yeah, I think the best point
come in and rise to the top.
I think the best point there too, that we really didn't talk about on the growth of the sport is, the fact that we have the people at the top are good people. And these are people, like, you look at the top 10 in both divisions, you look at all those people, and those are individuals that if you have kids, you're like, yes, I'm glad that you're a fan of that person, because like you said, they bring the full package off the course and on the course. I mean, you look at the work ethic of, Holcomb and Paige and Katrina, like, they're workhorses, and there's no problems off the course either. And then you look at, MPO, Paul Macbeth and Ricky, there's no negative things that are being talked about these guys. These are actual superstars who live it on both sides of it, which I think is a great point. And without that, we could be in a different place if we just had somebody who didn't really care and was crazy talented and did whatever he wanted off the course and, let the world see kind of that part of it. I think that that's important. And I think we're lucky that we have those people.
I wonder if that's something to do with the nature of the game too, right? Like, golf reveals a lot about a person. You can't hide things in your game, mentally and, emotionally, physically either. And so I wonder if some of that, growth, personal growth comes from just the game itself, and what it takes to grind it out on the road. It's not for the faint of heart.
Mm-mm.
One of the things I find fascinating is thinking about how the company side tracks ROI. Now, obviously, Tour Series discs or discs with a name on it, if we want to just say that more simply, that's pretty straightforward. You're going to see those sales numbers. It's very measurable. It's really easy to deal with. But in a broader sense, Jonathan, you talk about how in the past it was like, where are you in terms of performance at tournaments? Are you winning? What level of tournament are you winning? Obviously, being a highly rated player that's winning is going to be correlated with ability to move product, I would imagine, in most cases. But it's not the only thing. And there are players out there who are not necessarily the most winningest players who can still be a very valuable asset to a brand. So have your measurements for ROI in terms of how you decide which players are going to be on, the top team, have they changed, Jonathan, over time as you've looked at, sort of the way that disc golf has evolved?
Yeah, I mean, back to, just the sheer number of the Tour Series discs that are moving. I mean, that's obviously one of the things you got to look at. And then, the media and establishing media bonuses and tracking just how visible people are, looking at that sort of thing. And, I think a lot of it, you're still sort of running on, a little bit of your instincts here. Things have been changing quickly. We're not that far removed from like no live coverage other than majors here or there. So, whatever you were doing in 2020, you had to do probably a little differently in 2021, and everybody's going to have to evolve a little bit every year. So I think the metrics that stuff more and more is, really going to be handled by for us Innova West. I've always worked out of the East, and, so I'm not as tight with that group out there and sitting in on a lot of the meetings and having some of the discussions that they have out there. My discussions were always on their behalf and directly with the players, and just, doing the best you could. We had a lot of people and still have a lot of people, because we always believed in that. And Paul touched on this, the influence that a player can have, from a geographical standpoint. There's been a number of great examples of people who just held it down in their area. And they were huge influencers, and they were very accessible. A lot of times the players are a little easier if they can relax a little, and they can be more accessible at a B tier or a C tier or a smaller event like that, as opposed to, a pro tour or a major where it's pretty intense out there now with all the competition for your time. So anyway, little off topic.
Certainly their impact, just to respond to what you're saying, like, when you've got, I know this happens with the FPO division, when we've got an MPO and an FPO side by side, we lose a few of those fans to that MPO gallery, a regional player, they're just going to be domed by, Ricky and Paul at the national level, but at the regional level, they're the man and everybody knows who they are, so, that's awesome.
Yeah, one of the points that I give to some of the players that we reach out to is, listen, if you go to a national tour or let's say pro tour, now that national tour and those are combined, but if you go to an elite series event and you get 20th, like, what's the value there? And this is something I had to talk with the manufacturers about, because it's a hard thing to kind of see. Just to touch on your point, Sarah, is, let's say they get 15th place, which is amazing, but that's third card. How many people are following that third card if they're all regional players, right? You're going to assume that Macbeth and Ricky and all these super popular players are on those upper cards. So they get 15th place. What impact did they have at that tournament besides just a number that they got? To where if that player is dominating their local A tier, like you said, they're the man. And so I feel like, and this is just me personally, and I've had definite pushback from the manufacturers, I feel like that's more valuable than that person taking 30th or 20th place, because now they're there. The kids that are watching that are like, oh, I want to be like that guy. They're going to buy his product rather than being at the tournament. And I just feel like they're going to be overshadowed by the people who are winning the lead card. As the sport grows, obviously that's going to change because they're going to latch on to their favorite player, whoever that is. And there'll be more people. But right now, I mean, we have a minimum. The biggest galleries we're going to have, sell out at like 2,000. I think that's a pretty big overestimate. So you have 2,000 people there. Not everybody's going to fill up those cards all the way down to the last tee time.
One thing, if I can just add an anecdote to what you're saying there, Paul, and give a name that I think really good example. Dallin Blanchard is a pro who goes to occasional pro tour, but has a family, lives here in Idaho. He's high 1030s rated, wins everything in the area. And Infinite Discs did a signature run of tombs for him that sold like hotcakes and are still incredibly popular in the region. He may not have much value on the national level, but regionally, I mean, he is, like you said, brings a lot of influence and is sponsored by Innova and Infinite Discs. So I think that's a really, really good point. I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about something that Charlie and I have been talking about on the show recently, just given the time of year. Lately, and over the past few years, we've seen a trend towards multi-year contracts. We've seen with the trend towards multi-year contracts, the trend towards people switching mid-contract. What clauses exist, if any, that prevent movement in a typical contract? And again, I'm not asking for your specifics, but just generally from what you know, are there clauses that prevent you from breaking a contract? And what do those look like both on the manufacturer side, Jonathan, as well as on the player side?
So the one that really hits me. Oh, did you just ask Jonathan? I think
Jonathan for manufacturer side, player side from you guys. So okay, I want all three of you to speak, but whichever order.
I mean, I would say that that's something where, you're probably going to see more change in the future than maybe what we have in the past. And I think that will probably apply to all manufacturers because it's so competitive and there's a lot more money at stake now. I mean, there's a lot more riding on these contracts. I mean, ours have been historically, pretty laid back from that standpoint by design. I mean, rule number one is we want people who understand Innova's story and who want to represent that brand and the people behind that brand and believe in our stuff and feel comfortable throwing Innova disc. And, the whether written or unwritten, that was always the spirit that sort of governed everything we do. And I mean, if a better deal came along, or you lost faith in us, I mean, that it kind of kept both sides accountable. I mean, it took quite an effort to manage that many people, but you couldn't, you knew they could go. They were essentially unrestricted free agents all the time. So it really kind of kept you on your toes and accountable to them just as they would be accountable on their end of the deal. But, so I think that the players have, like in our camp, have kind of known that going in. And, especially after Paul's deal, I mean, that was, as we kind of round out 2018, working through that with him, Paul's a friend. I mean, he's a great guy. And you just like, I didn't have to know everything that he was going to get. I knew what he was turning down. And I was like, dude, I mean, if that's, this seems like a life-changing opportunity, obviously I don't want to, I hated to see our long run come to an end, but, I mean, you want what's best for everybody, and that was such an amazing opportunity. And I mean, I would say he handled it the right way. I mean, he saw his agreement through all the way to the end and was, totally stand up the whole way. And as a pro tip for people looking to get into this game, I mean, honor your words. It's a small circle here. It might seem huge, but everybody knows everybody. So back to taking care of your business. And, I think honoring the agreement that you're in with the caveat that at the end of the year, I mean, there hasn't been anything really in place that says, no, you cannot do this. It's more like, look, if we've let you down or you've got life-changing money, or another opportunity, and that's what you believe is best for you and your family, then, breaking up ain't easy, but sometimes it's the best for everybody.
From my perspective, it's been like the way back in the day that I didn't even have a contract for the first 4 or 5. Prodigy was the first contract I actually ever even signed. And there's always been, this yearly with Prodigy. It definitely felt like, 2 years and then we're going to renegotiate. But now it kind of has felt like I've done year to year. I did year to year for a while, and now I'm signing multis with MVP. And it feels like I'm writing in the contract with Penn, but that every year, like somebody could buy that contract out. Like it's I'm signing for it, and of course with MVP, I'm very happy with them. So I'm not really looking other places, but it does seem like we've had opportunities to increase my contract even though I'm still under contract. Like they're not so rigid that I can't increase the value of my contract or decrease that as well. I don't think the decrease would happen without a lawyer getting involved, but I think now we're going to start really seeing people getting bought out of contracts in the winter time. The multi-years, I think they show a commitment, but that also they're not unbreakable for sure. You can get lawyers involved, and if you really want a player, I think manufacturers could essentially kind of steal players a little bit if they wanted.
Yeah, those are great points. I think same thing as Sarah's talking about. My first contract was just a handshake or a phone call that said, yes, you're on the team type thing. And then that lasted for a long time. And same thing when I was with Innova. And then Prodigy was my first contract that I had. And Jonathan hit on a great point. I feel like I'm the type of person to where when I say, okay, I'm in for this, then I'm going to see that through no matter what. And I saw people on Prodigy kind of break that word. One of the things is in the sport right now, as we move forward, it's going to become easier because players are going to be able to afford the advice that they really need to make the right decision, right? And early on, a player could, read the contract, sign his name, and not really know what he was doing because he didn't have that good advice from a lawyer or somebody who would actually know. I've been the type of person to where as soon as I get a contract, I send it to a lawyer and I have him look over it and I have him explain it to me because I'm not good at that stuff. And so, for example, I believe there was an instance, and I won't name the player, but with Prodigy, they waited past a certain date to tell them I want to leave. And in the contract, it said there was a 60-day clause. Otherwise, you're presumed to sign for the next year. This person didn't read that. 60 days passed. And then through the off season, they're like, yeah, I'm leaving. And then Prodigy's like, no, you're not. Like, you signed on the dotted line and it said you had to tell us 60 days prior. So little things like that, I think, are really important. And to give advice to the up and coming players, like, get a professional to help you because Sarah's not good at it. I'm not good at it. Jonathan's not good at it because that's for a lawyer to look over. There's contract lawyers put in place for you to utilize and help you. Now, the problem is can't afford them. Lawyers are expensive. So then you have kids, legitimate kids, looking at these contracts and trying to figure them out, or they might have their parents helping them or something like that. But as the game moves forward, the best advice I can give is, yes, get a lawyer to help you look through that thing. And, Sarah, I thought it was interesting that you brought up that a manufacturer would be able to buy out a player. I think as we move forward, I don't think that should happen. And if the contracts are written properly, then again by a lawyer, then it's pretty easy to just have that contract and then you have to fulfill it, right? Now, there are contract clauses in there that it's like, okay, if the manufacturer doesn't do this, and then that's when you get to the nitty gritty to where you're like, well, they didn't send me a check on month 28 or whatever, and it wasn't on time, so they violated the contract. Right. You can start getting to the nitty gritty. But as the sport progresses, we won't see this as much, I don't think, because the contracts will get better. It'll become more professional, which I really hope that happens sooner rather than later, because it is kind of annoying to hear stories of players being like, nope, I'm done. And they're contractually obligated to play for that team. We don't know both sides of the story as well. If a player is getting mistreated by a manufacturer and they're not holding their end of the bargain up, then that's completely up to that player to try to get out of there. So it's kind of a loaded question that you're asking us, because you don't know the personal relationship between those players as far as contracts go. But I feel like the best answer is get a lawyer, make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's, because it's getting to the point where it is a lot of money and it's super important. I mean, these are life-changing contracts that we're starting to sign.
Yeah, and having a lawyer involved, it's not just to help you understand the parts of the contract, but also to ensure that the language used in the contract, the language between some of my contracts has been vastly different, in order to allow a little bit more autonomy to me as a player, and ensure that there's not going to be things that I didn't think about up the road that are going to come back and limit what I can actually do. So that's what my lawyer has helped me with most on contract negotiation. Player negotiation and all that other stuff, I think we're starting to see what a few marketing people or player agents kind of coming out. That would be, I am excited for that, the advent of that culture in the sport of as a player.
That is my next question. Agents, we're starting to see actually fairly quickly players getting connected with those who are sort of negotiating on their behalf. And, they're sort of famously, Paul Macbeth had somebody, an agent, negotiate the contract that he initially signed with Discraft. And I heard at the time that Innova was not particularly interested in negotiating with an agent. And I've also heard subsequently that other manufacturers are not particularly keen on dealing with agents. And I have to say, from my vantage point, it's sort of like this has long been a very personal business, and that makes it much more impersonal. And obviously, it's also going to push manufacturers to have to pay more in most cases than they maybe otherwise would like to. That's obviously a benefit to the player. It's going to be some growing pains for manufacturers. Where does the agent representation fall, in your minds? Do either you, Sarah, Paul, have an agent right now that you're working with? And Jonathan, from the management side of things, are you welcoming this at this time, or do you think it's premature, which is something that I've heard from a couple of other manufacturers?
I'm sort of in the middle there. I think that, Sarah and Paul have both made good points. You need to get whatever counsel, whether it's, a formal paid attorney or whether it's friends or family or whatever, get somebody that you really know and trust to help you through it. I can't speak to all of the different, the different contracts that are out there from various manufacturers. I would not say that ours is super heavy reading. It's pretty straightforward. And it's not written in a way to try and get a leg up on you. It's just there to protect both parties. That's the whole point. So, I feel like you definitely need counsel. It's hard for me as somebody who has gone about it the way that I have, and seen it now for, 25 years sort of evolve. You don't really want it, or you hate to see it get, to have the agent come fully in between you and the player. I would hate to do that particular job and not be able to have plenty of conversations with the athlete directly. I'm the one that should know them better. An agent can come in and can help guide them on some of the legal bits and pieces, but at the end of the day, that's my job. I need to know how they're feeling, how they're doing, what they want, what they like, what they don't like, and adjust the contracts accordingly. So as long as it doesn't completely eliminate the conversation, and at some point that's probably inevitable. Maybe it will have to go that way. And I'm sure that will maybe pave the way for more money to be made, but I wouldn't necessarily mean that would equate to better. I think that we've had it pretty darn good up to this point. This seems like a golden era where the players are getting paid what they should be getting paid. And we're still able to kind of do things in sort of that friends and family Frisbee kind of culture. And so for me personally, I hate to see that completely go away. I know it might not really have a choice there, but I think it'd be a sad day if you see, the suits in the corner offices just thinking, oh, well, it doesn't matter. We've got them locked up for 3 more years. I don't have to call and congratulate him on, on that first win or that first major or that whatever it might be. So hopefully as things evolve, it doesn't eat away at what's super special about disc golf, and that's the people.
Yeah, I have not had someone represent me really in the past myself. I've had kind of dabbled in having someone else negotiate for me a little bit. But so far, I really haven't found anybody that knows what they're doing. We don't have agents right now that are experienced. They're everybody just kind of tried it out. So are you really going to bank your livelihood on somebody else's ability to negotiate for you, despite how difficult it may be to sell yourself directly? I know it's much easier for me personally when someone else is talking about what I've done and how great I am, instead of me trying to voice that directly to, like, I'm so great, I did all these things, you should pay me more, versus coming from someone else that's like, look at this stuff that she did, like she's this, she's that. It's definitely more powerful. I think it can be more impactful when someone else is selling you versus you trying to, find that balance between, your ego and the truth. But in general, I would love for someone to be negotiating for me. But so far, I haven't really found anybody that can do it.
Yeah. So the one thing that's interesting is, like, if I'm unhappy with a manufacturer, that conversation is going to be really tough for me to get my point across to that manufacturer, because we're all friends, like Jonathan said. So let's say that there's a situation where I'm just unhappy. I don't think I'm getting paid enough. I know it in my heart. How am I going to voice that in a respectful way to that person? Right. And then we're talking about people who I've known for 15 years. And then I come to them, I'm like, no, you're mistreating me, like, period. Like, you didn't do this, this, this. That's a really tough conversation. And that's why agents are so important, is because they're able to go to bat for you. You don't even have to be in the room, or you could be in the room, but they're going to do their best to represent you and get what's best for you. Right. Now, as far as like in disc golf agents, I have actually two people who work for me as kind of an agent. I told them, you get nothing for what I will get inside the disc golf community. So I basically hire these people to get me sponsorships outside of disc golf. The reason I did that right now, I feel like with the spot that we're in disc golf right now, whatever deal I get inside the disc golf community was my work, was the work that I've done over the 15 years, was the relationships that I've built. And so, of course, somebody coming in and maybe they have some new putting equipment or something, they're going to know who I am by the work that I've done, and the agent will then benefit from that. What I feel like the players need agents for is outside of disc golf, because now they're doing something that I cannot do. I cannot speak for myself if I'm going to want to be sponsored by Ford, because I know nothing about Ford and I know nothing about the communication between Ford and myself. I could send them an Instagram message, not well written. You know what I mean?
And you'd be talking to their intern who's 19 years old.
Yeah,
do
my
it.
Punctuation's off, and they're just going to dismiss me. Now, with an agent, they're going to have that language down, right, to where they'll be able to talk to them, find the right avenues, which takes time. I could probably figure out how to get in touch with somebody, but that could take hours and hours, and that's something that I could be doing something else. So an agent, I feel like now my agents that work for me are busy trying to find outside of disc golf relationships that I do not have, and then bring them into disc golf. So I do feel like there is a spot for an agent as far as them coming in and trying to negotiate a new extension with Discraft. I wouldn't want that, because that's a personal level. Like Jonathan said, I would hate to see that go, and I know it eventually will. But I would hate for myself, those are my friends and people that trusted me with this, and I should be able to communicate on my own behalf and come to an understanding.
So I feel like we could go for 3 hours right now on this various topics. I have one last thing that I'd like to get to, which is something that Sarah mentioned earlier, which was NDAs. And I think what's fascinating, as somebody who's been kind of following disc golf on the media side for a long time, fans are obsessed with where players are going to go and what the rumors are, and oh wow, they switched from this team to that team, and what does this mean? And the whole concept of team in a world of an individual sport is kind of funny on its own, but people they love this stuff. And when we've seen the numbers come out, I often tell people when I'm talking to a friend or something, or an acquaintance, they ask me what I do. I tell them what I do, and I say, I report on disc golf and ultimate frisbee, and I talk a little bit about the sports. And one of the things I often tell them is, yeah, Paul McBeth signed who's like the best player in the history of the game, signed a 10-year, $10 million contract, and people's minds are blown by that, and that having that number out there is so incredibly powerful. So what I'm wondering is, are we going to get to the point where we see manufacturers and players recognizing that fans are incredibly invested in knowing what these contracts look like, at least in the numbers sense? We just saw Kristen Tatar, 4 years, 250. These are big numbers, right? This is a substantial amount of money. And to see that out there as like an actual number that people can hook onto, even if there's, you're not going to get into the contract details, but is that coming? Like, are we going to see it trend towards what we see in pro sports, in pro team sports, where those contracts are always leaked?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the nose. They're leaked. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm not quite sure how, so I can't really talk for other sports. I'm not quite sure if that's completely public knowledge of exactly what they make, but the sheer number of what they're making, it really doesn't matter to us because we know it's in the millions, right? And in disc golf,
you pretty much know all major, in the pro sports, what players are making and like what their contracts are.
I think so, but I don't know if you do like in something that's close to us. If you go to like a snowboarding company or skateboarding or whatever, I'm not sure that that's complete public knowledge. As far as a team goes, their salary cap, so that's easy for them to be able to put those numbers out there because they're obligated to only pay those players a certain number. I guess like a Nike contract with like LeBron, like they come out and they say it's worth this much money. So I guess in some cases there are, but as far as like a team like a Lakers, it's like a different story. And I don't know how that works with like a skateboarding, or what about Bags? Bags is on ESPN now. I wonder how much those guys are making. As far as like disc golf, I hope it gets to that point because like you said, I think there's value in knowing what people get and there's hype with that. And that just pushes everything forward. I think that the manufacturers right now, there's 100 people on the team. And so that you could probably let people know, but maybe feelings get hurt. And I think that's something that they might be, my honest answer is that might be something that they're kind of shying away from because they don't want to have to maybe shell out that money. I mean, it's an obvious answer, right? That we're all kind of skating around, but I think that's what it is.
Really quick, I said 4 years, 250 for Kristen Tatar. It's 4 years, 500. Just misspoke.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, Paul just kind of touched on this. Like, I mean, knowing it's just like in the corporate world, right? You're not supposed to talk about your salary, and knowing what everyone else makes around you causes company culture issues. It doesn't work in the favor of the actual corporate, giant, the corporate person. So, I mean, being able to reveal this information is only really good for the players. Outside of, your obvious first point, which, it's shocking to people to hear how much someone makes throwing Frisbees. And also that can be a great source of inspiration for the younger generation to think, okay, this is a viable career. But, in the short term, certainly it would be very helpful for the players to be able to discuss that in order to know their value, which gives them negotiating power. And it does not fall in. So it's really funny that I'm the one on the conversation that doesn't have a hand in this, because Paul obviously is a manager and Jonathan. So I'm going to be from that other perspective that, yeah, we need to be able to talk about this. And I'd like to see it coming. I mean, it's kind of like the players union ideas that the Pro Tour is starting to kind of work through some of that stuff with the Tour Pass, the new Tour Pass this year. It's got a ton of amenities. And I think that they might be one of the catapults that could kind of create the culture that it's important for us to know our value.
Jonathan, what do you think?
I would imagine in the shorter term, it'll probably come more from, and I'm speaking just obviously through our lens. I mean, see announcements like that coming from the players, or players being willing to reveal or share that information with whoever might want to be reporting on it. As opposed to the company, like for our culture, I don't think we would ever promote that. Right. I mean, and that's different from not wanting it to be out there.
Sure.
I mean, this is the players' good news. I mean, hopefully we can arrive at a situation for any of our top players where everybody's happy and they feel cared for and compensated and all the good feels. But it's about the money, but it's not. I mean, it's just a little bit deeper than that. So it's we're not looking for the big sexy headline to be like, yeah, we did this. I mean, if it's out there, it's out there, and I don't see a downside of the transparency. I mean, I don't know that we've given Paul Macbeth in terms of the things that have happened, the things that have changed. It kind of starts with him in my mind. I mean, having had so many conversations with him about what he wanted and what he wanted to do and what he saw, what he wanted, not just for himself, but for Innova and then for Discraft and for all the players out there who he cares an awful lot about. I mean, kudos to him. If we haven't said it yet, to pushing things forward for all the players. I mean, I don't know that there's been a bigger difference maker than he has. And you're feeling it even right now. I mean, with every one of these negotiations, it's okay, well, I might not be the $10 million guy, but I mean, I'm $1 million guy, right? So it's the impact of that. I mean, the first 3-year deal we did with him was it blew everything out of the water I'd ever seen, and 3 years later it wasn't close, which I guess tells you a little bit about why you should be careful in a long-term deal. I mean, if you don't have a lot of good flexibility in there as quickly as things are changing, I never really wanted to go more than 2 years. And it's not because we didn't want to commit. It's just, it's going to look radically different 2 more years. It might not be good for you or us to be doing this. We know it's probably going to go up. So, we can enter into a longer agreement if it helps you feel more secure that we're not going anywhere and that we're going to honor our commitment to you. But we're going to need to revisit it probably every year because things are going to change. And there's more companies out there, more at stake. They got lots of inventory, lots of overhead, super competitive. They're going to be gunning for those players. So anyway.
It's quite the dance.
Yeah, it is. I think you hit on it as well, Sarah, with talking about the corporate world and team morale and camaraderie. As a captain, that's something I don't want to lose in a team. I want everybody rooting for everybody, and that's hard to do. That's a really tightrope to kind of walk on, especially in an individual sport. And if they all know exactly what they're making and then they want more and different things, as far as my position as a captain, that's something that could make my job harder. And moving forward, yeah, I'm also a player and I want people to know what I make because I'm excited about it, or I want to know what that, to give value to the player as well. But I think it's a fine line we need to kind of walk down, and I think it's just going to take time to really figure out what works and what doesn't, and eventually get to that. I don't think there'll ever be a perfect solution to it, but as long as the sport keeps growing, I think we're doing really good.
Yeah, and I also want to reiterate that, the fact that Paul, I mean, we talked early on about how Prodigy made such an impact and changed kind of the sponsorship game, but then, definitely Paul being forthright with his contracts. And then even Kristen, I mean, I brought her contract up in my negotiations this year, because she was willing to come out with that information. But manufacturers also have to, quit making us sign the NDAs. And I'm not even saying that when it comes to how Jonathan was mentioning, I'm not here to promote how much we're paying our player, I want them to be excited about that. And I'm not even someone who's going to say, oh, I'm going to talk about how much I make, but I do need to have the freedom to do so with, my colleagues. I do need to understand where all the just general contracts are in the world of disc golf right now, so that I know where I fit in there and I know how I can negotiate with my particular manufacturer.
I also think that manufacturers kind of value different things more in different areas, which makes it tough on negotiating contracts. Or there could be a player who is like top 4 in everything. And if that player is on the same team as somebody else who's getting paid more, I mean, I could bring Sexton up for sure. I mean, he definitely wins a lot, but he probably doesn't win as much as Ricky. I think we can all agree on that. And I wouldn't doubt that their contracts are pretty similar, or Sexton could have made more than him just by the sheer numbers of Sexton Firebirds that he throws. And then a player like that, and I don't know this, I'm just hypothetically throwing this out there, Ricky can be like, what the heck? I beat the socks off of this guy every single weekend. Like, why is he getting paid more than me? Well, there's value in different areas, right? He's a team captain and he does all these different things. And I think that's a point that needs to be made, just as far as like, maybe they shouldn't be that public right now, because we aren't sure what really is more valuable. Is winning the most valuable thing? Is it?
Right.
Is it really? You know what I mean? Like if I go to, and I've given this example to a few people, if I go to a tournament, how many Calvin hats do you see? I'm not picking on Calvin, but how many do you see in the gallery? How many big germ hats do you see?
Mm-hmm.
You get what I mean? That there's value in other areas, not just winning.
It's a fascinating conversation to have, and it's fascinating to see it continue to unfold, and players who are at the top of the sport starting to make 6-figure salaries, meaningful money for people to just live a kind of normal existence. I mean, I'm hearing the story, people buying houses in the off season. Like that's not something that was happening much in disc golf, even like 2-3 years ago. So, I want to just say thank you so much to each of you for coming on. I mean, again, we can do part 2 sometime. But Jonathan Poole, Sarah Hoke, and Paul Ulibarri, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation, guys, and appreciate you guys having me. It was nice chatting with Sarah and Jonathan.
Indeed. Thanks for having me. What a great time.
Yep. Thank you guys. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to everybody. Happy New Year as well. This show will be out just after Christmas and right before the New Year. So thank you so much. And we will talk to you in January in 2022. Hopefully a less COVID-filled year in 2022. Thanks so much, everybody. And we'll see you next year on The Upshot.